Today's episode is brought to you by Majaji Books.
Majaji Books is an independent publisher making rain for Southern African women writers and readers.
Majaji has some great new titles available. I'm especially excited to get my hands on Bloomer by Anne Schlebusch.
Oh, I've just got a copy of it, but I don't know much about it.
It's a novel about a 70-year-old woman who reinvents herself when she and her whole retirement community get locked down during COVID.
The power of the older woman, that's exactly what we've been talking about.
Yes. Which Majaji title are you looking forward to reading?
Well, we've also been talking about screenwriting and the process of adapting books for movies and television, so I'm excited to read a book called Cut to the Chase by Janet van Eerden.
Janet is an award-winning screenwriter, producer, and lecturer. Cut to the Chase is a step-by-step guide to script and screenwriting for beginners.
Ask for both these Majaji titles by name at your favorite bookstore. If they don't have it, they can order for you.
Or you can order it directly from www.majajibooks.co.za.
That's www.modjajibooks.co.za.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Hidden Lives of Writers. My name's Fiona Snyckers, and I'm joined by my co-host, Gail Schimmel. Gail's been looking a little frazzled today, and I'm wondering, is it the day job or is it your writing week that's been a bit hectic?
Fiona, it's everything. It's the day job, it's the parenting, and then on top of it, I'm busy doing structural edits with a very tight deadline. I don't really understand why the deadline's so tight, but I'm a very compliant writer. If I'm told to do something, I do it. And I have these structural edits to do, and I'm fitting them in between everything else.
Gail, can you perhaps explain to us what structural edits are? Because I don't think all our listeners will know.
Absolutely. So structural edit is when your editors had a first read of your book and they are telling you basically what is wrong with your book. Develop this character more, describe this scene more. Oh my goodness, you've got a major plot hole over here. None of this book makes sense. That type of thing. And it's actually a process I love. I love being edited. I love that this world that has been my private world for so long, now somebody else comes into it. And they treat it as if it's real. We have debates about whether this is true to the character or not. And this is someone I've made up. And I love it when I share that world with someone. But it's also, you open that document and basically
horrifying moment.
Yeah. Red tracking everywhere. And you kind of have to close the document and take a deep breath and reopen it. And what I do is I put it on, simple markup rather than detailed markup. So I can't actually see everything that's been done, and I can't get upset that my comma's been moved. And I read it, and then I realize that my editor, who is my editor that I've always had, Nicola Raystake, just makes me sound more like me. And it's brilliant, and I love it. But it's quite hard work, and it's got to be done by Wednesday.
Oh, wow. Okay. Should we let you go right now to carry on with that?
And Fiona, your writing week?
It's been not wildly productive, but I'm following a method that I read about probably online, because that's where I read about everything, called the flashlight method.
Tell me more.
It's kind of what I've been doing anyway, but it was just interesting to hear it explained. It's described as when you're walking along a pathway at night, okay, you know your beginning point and you know more or less what your end point is, but you can't see the way clearly. But you're holding, I guess in South Africa we'd call it a torch. In America they call it a flashlight. You're holding a flashlight which lets you see a few steps ahead.
Okay.
And you walk along, you can see a few steps ahead, and then there's a bend in the road, and then you can see a few steps after that. So it's a kind of discovery process of writing. You haven't got everything mapped out every step of the way, and you're not going along utterly clueless either. You're not kind of fumbling in the pitch dark. You've got the flashlight to help you sort of see ahead. You maybe know what's coming in the next page or two, and you maybe know what the final destination is, but you don't have the whole thing mapped out.
And do you then do you make notes of the things that you're seeing with your flashlight? Do you plan ahead? Do you go the next few chapters, this is what I need to get in?
In a way, when I start writing for the day, I just go. I've got an idea of where this piece of writing is going. And then when it's time to stop for the day, my flashlight has shown me a few steps ahead. So I just make a couple of notes, A dies, B gets married, and C comes down with COVID or whatever, just to remind myself that that's where I saw it going.
Okay. It does sound like you said, it's a thing it sounds a lot like how I write, because I know the end and I know where I need to be in the middle.
Okay.
Then I look ahead a few. But interesting, very interesting to hear it named and described.
Yeah, it's quite intuitive, and maybe it wouldn't work for everybody, but at this kind of stage in my career, that's what's working for me. And it was just interesting to see it described.
And Fiona, in terms of what you filling up with, what you're absorbing, what do you have for us this week?
Oh, I am reading such a nice book at the moment. In fact, I kind of want to stop what we're doing now and just get back to it because it is so fascinating. It's called The Golden Couple, and it's got two authors, Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekanen. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. It's just such a fascinating premise. It's such a great premise. It's not like one of these high concept, twisty plots, but it's a brilliant premise. One of the characters is a psychologist. She's a licensed therapist, or rather she was a licensed therapist. She had her license revoked because she got sick and tired of all the kind of pesky ethics surrounding psychologists and how they're meant to conduct themselves. And she decided, screw it, and she's going her own way. And she's offering therapy, especially to couples, where the rules just go out the window. She does her own research. If the wife mentions, my husband's ex-girlfriend is Nicola, and I think Nicola still has a crush on him, she, the therapist, will go and meet Nicola at the school gates and have a little chat with her and then bring back to the therapy sessions what she thinks. I think people in therapy often say to the therapist, what should I do? I don't know what to do. And what the therapist is meant to do is kind of lead you.
What would you like to do?
Yes. Kind of lead you to your own conclusion of what you want to do. But this therapist is like, you should do this, and then you should do that, and then you should do that, and then you will be better. And it satisfies something in me, like where you can see this terrible situation, and being on the outside, you can see the roadmap out of it. And it's so frustrating that the people aren't getting there by themselves. But of course, I can see where this is going. It's going to turn out that those pesky little ethics were actually there for a reason and were probably a very good idea. And I kind of suspect that this is a bit of a thriller or a suspense novel. So maybe somebody's going to die or somebody's going to get attacked.
Please promise me, because I have had a lot of experiences recently where the book starts out like, oh my God, this is the book I've been waiting for my whole life. And then suddenly it's like,
okay,
please promise me, come back to me and tell me, does it keep up the promise of the initial premise, or does it fizzle out or become ridiculous, or any of the other terrible things that happen to books?
I will do that. I might even review it at some point, post it online. But for now, I can't wait to get back to it. And you, Gail, what have you been reading or watching or listening to?
So as part of I've talked about how I've got a new idea percolating. And as part of it, I've recognized that what I'm loving reading and watching at the moment is quirky things. So examples of the sort of books I've loved recently in the last year, Impossible by Sarah Lotz. I loved that moment.
Enjoyed
where
it too.
That thing happens and I'm like, oh my goodness. I loved Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I think that's how you say his surname.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I liked it. Yes.
I loved it. I love Sliding Door Moment, alternate reality books. I love them. I love books with quirk. And the thing I've really loved, and it's unusual for me because I watch very little TV, but I somehow stumbled across a program called the Santa Clarita Diet.
Right, with Drew Barrymore.
Looking so beautiful. And it's about this all-American couple who really are quite a caricature of the all-American couple, big smiles, lovely to each other. But unfortunately, she catches a kind of virus and becomes a zombie.
Okay.
And starts needing to eat people to survive. And it just something about it catches my sense of humor and my sense of the ridiculous. I binge watched everything. I found it the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I find the idea of a person, she'll stand there with a packet snacking and it's human toes she's snacking on.
Okay.
And
where does she get them?
Well, that is. So a lot of the program is about where does she get them.
Oh, okay.
And how do you be an ethical zombie? Mm-hmm. And they remain this all-American couple throughout it. And it made me laugh. The last episode of the second season, I actually fell off the couch. I laughed so much.
Okay.
So I'm loving that. And I'm trying to identify the writer in me is how does one build that quirk into our work? And it's hard. I haven't found the solution yet, but in the meantime, I'd love to hear what other people think about that show. I haven't found anyone who's watched it, and I just loved it.
Is it still carrying on, or has it been cancelled now? Do you know?
I'm not sure, but I really am hoping that it carries on. I'm so hungry for more. Hungry like she's hungry for human toes.
I was just going to say. We are so excited to welcome Sue Nyathi into the studio today. You know Sue from her 4 novels, The Polygamist, The Gold Diggers, A Family Affair, An Angel's Demise, and the rather harrowing collection of personal stories that she curated and edited called When Secrets Become Stories. Hi, Sue, and welcome. What has your writing week been like?
Hi, Gail and Fiona. Thank you for having me. My writing week hasn't been too hectic. I'm currently working on a new television series.
Ooh.
So I was just doing an episode summary. Nothing hectic.
I don't even know where to start to unpack that. I don't even know what that means. What is an episode summary?
So I'm working on a new limited series. So we're developing the concept from scratch. So we've been, for the past month, I could say, we've been plotting the episodes of the series. So it's 9 episodes. So we were finally doing our last episode. So
is it enormous fun?
I love it. I mean, it's, I think it's, it's storytelling, but it's a different medium. And I also like that I'm in a writer's room, so you're not working alone. Mm-hmm. You're bouncing off ideas. And I just love the energy that comes with, filmmaking.
Very exciting.
So this isn't based on any of your previous stories or novels or anything like that. You said it's a concept from scratch.
No, it's something, it's totally different. So normally what I do, since I left corporate, what I've tried to do was to work in the creative space and find jobs that stimulate my creativity. And so that's how I ended up going into television, script writing. And so you work on different shows. And so I don't want to write a book every year or I normally take a gap. So during my gap years, I work in TV and do the TV stuff. So
I think let's take a step back there because I want you to actually tell us your career path story, how you came. I know you were a financial advisor at some point.
Analyst, yeah.
And financial analyst. And the Sue I know and a financial analyst, I can't bring together in my head into a coherent whole. Tell us how you started, when you knew you wanted to write, because I know you've written from very young, and that career path, how you came to be where you are now.
So I think I always knew I wanted to write from a young age. Even as a child, when I was the middle child, and a girl, so a flank between, 2 boys. I was, the middle child, and I played alone a lot. But even in my play, I used to make up stories. So I already had that inclination. I remember my father used to be so concerned. He'd be like, why are you like talking to yourself? And I'm like, I'm not talking to myself. There are characters around me. I would create these characters and I would act out stories. So already I knew that, this is in me. And when I then, when I started school, started learning how to read and write and the vocabulary, when I had the vocabulary, then I started writing actually on paper and with pen and paper.
In what language?
In English, because, that was the first language, I was taught, to be very conversant in. I could speak in Ndebele, but I couldn't write it at that age. So that's how it grew. So it started off with pictures, cutting out pictures from magazines, writing stories around those pictures. And then until I stopped doing the pictures and just writing, just all story. So it was always there. I think for my parents, they never encouraged it because, they come from a generation where they like, children were professionals. Your kids aspire to be doctors, lawyers, accountants. So being a writer was not something that was like, oh, our child wants to be a writer.
Yeah, there's no clear career path there
for a writer. And even when I later in life, I wanted to go into journalism because a cousin of mine ventured into it. They were like, no, it's just not the kind of career you want to do. It's not a respectable career. So it was met with a lot of resistance. So that's how I ended up, being channeled towards finance. So I did a BCom in finance, and then later I did a master's in finance and investments.
A master's in finance?
Yeah. So
good Lord.
Yeah. So see, it's totally different.
There are no characters in finance.
No, that's what I'm saying. It was just numbers. But numbers tell a story too. So once you learn to, manipulate them and understand them as well, and read between, the numbers, there's a story there too. And I think when I became a financial analyst, that's what it was, looking at financial reports from companies and seeing what the story is behind the numbers. So it's a different kind of thing, but it really did stifle my creative. It's not a job that is, lends to creativity, even the writing. I remember it's like almost you have to switch off because the biggest gripe they used to have was your writing is too flowery. I have to get into gear all the time, like, and be, very, So I think look, when I have a career spanning over 15 years. So I think when I turned just before I turned 40, I had that talk with myself that, look, you have to decide what you want. You can't do both. I mean, it was clear I couldn't do both. I'd been trying to do both, juggling, the corporate and the writing. But, cause you obviously something's going to suffer when you try to do two things. And so I made the decision, well, okay, I've done the finance for, for a great part of my life. So let me give the writing a chance. And, give it my all so that if it doesn't work, at least I don't have that thing. Oh, I don't want to have regrets. So I said, no. So let's see what pans out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least you tried it, right?
And so you quit the day job. I
didn't quit, but, my position was retrenched. So it was when the offer came, I was like,
this is a sign.
Yeah, it's a sign. This is the universe. Whatever if you believe in the universe or it's God speaking to me. So I said, okay, I'll take the package. And that's how I left corporate. But I think in the back of my head, I was still thinking, well, I can always find a job. And it's not like it's not the end, but at least now I have this package. I can write. I don't have pressure, like financially trying to figure out when the next paycheck is coming from. So at least I had that peace of mind because I'm also a single parent. So, you always want stability, financial stability. So that happened in 2018 when I turned 40, just a month before I turned 40. And I've never, I'm still here. I'm still writing. I'm still alive. So, I'm not, so now I definitely, I'm not going back to corporate. Yeah.
There's a lovely scene in The Gold Diggers when the twins are children and they're playing alone together and they're also talking in those voices and totally wrapped up in their own world. Something that the adults are completely excluded from until their mom walks up to them and they don't know it, but she's making an announcement that's going to change their life forever. So was that based on watching your own child play, or was it based on your memory of being a child, creating your own world, creating your own stories?
Yeah, it was probably, based from my own, childhood play as someone who used to play a lot on my own. Yeah. But the memory, I mean, it's not in, parts of it. So I think when we write as writers, we do borrow from our own, childhood, and subconsciously, sometimes you do it without even realizing it.
Yeah.
But we do it, yeah.
We're magpies. We just take little bits here, there, and everywhere.
Yes.
Whatever suits us at the time. You've mentioned that, when you were 13, you created a handwritten book with its own cover and it kind of got distributed all over school, and that you were inspired by the Sweet Valley High stories.
Yes.
Now, children, you grew up in Bulawayo, is that right?
Yes.
children in Bulawayo now, are they still reading Sweet Valley High, or have they got stories that reflect their own lives in a different way?
I have no idea because I'm so out of touch with, children. Yeah, in Bulawayo, I mean.
And I've got a feeling, and this is just a gut feeling, that if one read a Sweet Valley High now, it would be so dated and so cringy to borrow from the kids. I've got a feeling it would be terrible.
Yeah.
But I don't think they have something in place of it, because if you think of that young adult market, it's very thin in terms of, Sweet Valley High was very iconic.
Right.
I've never heard even my niece, when she was a teenager, speaking of anything of that sort. I don't know what they're reading, honestly. And because I don't have children that age, I'm very out of touch with, what books they're reading. And I haven't, when I go home, I'm very out of touch with the schools. So I don't know really what has filled that void, if anything.
I think there's still a void there. I think there's still a big gap in the market for preteen and teen literature set in African countries so that children coming up can kind of see themselves in the characters.
And where it's got a bit of, the Sweet Valley High books had a naughtiness to them. Like
Yes.
it was a bit like, should you be reading this? Shouldn't you? And having quite non-reading children, I see the one way you can tempt them into reading is by implying that the book's unsuitable because there's too much sex. No, you can't read that, my darling. There's far too much sex. Best way to get a child reading. So I want to go back a little bit because you've done the thing that I'm very envious of, having left corporate, even though I love my day job, but you're a full-time writer. Can you tell us what the day of a full-time writer looks like? And I want to know the things like how many words do you write a day? Where do you write them? How do you structure your day around your writing? I'm sure you will just automatically make me envious, but make me envious.
No, so I think when you're writing full-time, it's exactly that. It's full time. So if I have a book project, like I'll speak about The Angel's Demise because that's the last thing I've done. But it was waking up, getting my son to school. You coming back at 9, you start. It's writing for me, it was from 9 to 3 p.m. every day. Okay.
Solid writing or taking breaks?
No, it's solid. It's like you're trying to put in at least about 1,500 to 2,000 words.
Okay.
And they don't have to be good words, but it's just trying to get that number in.
And when you sit down to write those words, do you know what your plan is for the day? How do you, or do you come to the page and have to figure out where you are that day?
No, I do, because by then I've already plotted, I've got an outline of how the book should go. So I'm very big on structure. So in terms of, I might not plot chapter by chapter, but if I'm writing in parts, I know what must happen in part 1, part 2, part 3. So it's kind of like if you've on chapter 10, I kind of have an idea of what's supposed to happen. And I follow, yeah.
So you're definitely a plotter rather than a pantser.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so one part of your history that I found very interesting was a time when you were kind of working as a journalist in Zimbabwe. You were doing an advice column in a newspaper?
No, so I wasn't working as a journalist. I was still I was in corporate finance at the time.
Right.
And it was that era of Sex and the City.
Right.
And I loved that series. And I always...
There's a pattern here, Sweet Valley High, Sex and the City.
And I always considered myself like a Carrie Bradshaw, So it was like, in my way, I was like trying to find something to be creative about, because I'm stuck in this job all day. I just needed a little outlet where I could actually be doing something creative on the side. And so I started doing that column. It was called Steaming Off. I used to contribute, yes.
And your readers were very interactive, weren't they? They used to write to you and suggest that you write about this and ask for help with their problems and so on, weren't they? Okay.
And so that really sparked off, you kind of realize that people actually do have a lot of problems and would like, people to explore a lot of things that are not spoken about. Yeah.
Do you think that's a source for writing ideas, that insight into people's problems?
Not really, because I was writing more about my own problems. I remember the one time I wrote about, being single on Valentine's Day. Mm-hmm. And I storyfied it.
Yeah.
But, people could relate, it was like that kind of thing that sparked off. Oh yeah, I've also been there. It's that kind of thing. And things resonated with people. So it was, those kind of things that I used to write. Yeah. It was just like, sharing things about me, not necessarily, giving advice, but it was just like talking about things around relationships. Yeah.
Your first published work was The Polygamist in 2012, but you've said that you have other unpublished manuscripts lying around and that you might be revisiting them in the future.
I have revisited them. So all those manuscripts I spoke about there was a family affair. Right. Something I wrote in my 20s.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was already in existence before The Polygamist. An Angel's Demise was also already in existence. It wasn't called that. It was called Skeletons in the Closet.
Right.
But the manuscript was already there. So it's like, those are the books I always spoke about revisiting. So I have.
Right. And you have
and talk to us, what is it like to go back to work you wrote as a young woman? Now, as a slightly more mature, more knowledge of the world, when you first reread those old books, was it like, oh, actually I was quite good, or was it, oh my God, I didn't know anything?
It was, oh my God. And because I used to wonder, back in those days, when I used to get rejections, it would break my heart. But reading it now, I understand why that work was rejected. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. So it was like, and I'm glad it was rejected. It wasn't ready. So, and it was nice, reworking all
How
that.
did you do that? What was the process? Did you start from scratch rewriting?
No. The story wasn't the problem. The storyline was fine. It was the writing, how it was written. So I knew it was just improve the writing.
Okay.
So there was absolutely nothing wrong with the stories and the story ideas. That wasn't an issue. So it's easier when you're starting because you're building on something. You already have a foundation. You've
already got your, what people refer to, shitty first draft.
Yes, exactly. So that's basically what I was picking up on from, because then I can look at it, with maturity and wisdom and experience and think, okay, this I can keep, this you can't. So, so it's that kind of approach.
And did you add to the story and add layers?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like you're saying, you're building on something. So you already have a foundation. It's just building on it. So, yeah.
Gail, do you have any unpublished manuscripts lying around?
Yes, I do, and it will remain so. And in fact, it's been stolen now, so it's all to the best. I had a laptop stolen. With unsaved, unpublished, and worse, a current work in progress. I had a book on that laptop that was 30,000 words old.
Oh no! And it wasn't saved to cloud.
I wasn't doing it at that stage. I have to tell you though. It probably is the best thing that can happen to a writer because I rewrote it and I wrote it better. Yeah. And I've heard about somebody who that's their method. They write, put aside, and then write it again. And I can see that it must be spectacular, but I'm definitely too lazy to ever do that again. Now I save to the cloud. Now I am a worshipper at the shrine of the cloud.
No, I mean, it gets crazy because there's some things that once you get down, you can't rewrite again. You lose it. So it's like some sentences you're like, wow. So for me, especially when I'm like on the draft, when you've got a manuscript to submit, I save like crazy. I'll be saving like 3. I email myself, yeah.
That's the difference between you and me. So you write beautiful sentences that you're sad to lose. I've never written a sentence that I've gone, oh wow, afterwards in my life. I think that actually leads to one of the big things I want to talk to Sue about. You and I have had a lot of interesting conversations about the difference between commercial and literary fiction. Mm-hmm. Where you feel you fit on that spectrum. And we've also talked about as a black writer, getting pigeonholed as a literary writer. So a lot of stuff in that question. Talk to me.
Yeah. So, I've never actually, envisaged myself or marketed myself as a literary fiction writer. And I've never wanted to be in that category. Mm-hmm. And if I think of all the writers that, I sort of like benchmark myself to.
Sweet Valley High.
No, Sweet Valley. Like the writers Carrie like Bradshaw. I admire. No, not even Carrie. Like Dorothy Koomson, right?
Oh, yes.
That's, I would that's where I see myself. I'm in that category,
Okay,
so
that's kind of women's fiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not really the literary academic, but I end up getting pushed that side. But that's never where I've like really positioned myself. So.
And do you think, because we've talked about this, do you think it's because you're a black writer and there's this feeling that black writers are always writing something very in-depth and important, and therefore what you are writing must be very in-depth and important?
I think, I think as an African writer, you don't have a choice. You're supposed to be always, channeling profound stuff. It's like, because people will be saying, what's the point? So you are like, forced into this like category of, if you're not writing like Chinua Achebe, it was, you have to be writing that. And I think that's so restrictive. Like we haven't been allowed to go out and, just write stuff that we want to write,
Although I am going to argue with those beautiful sentences, you do have a touch of the literary writer about you. I'm sorry to pigeonhole you like that.
You used an interesting technique in your first novel, The Polygamist, where there are these characters that we inhabit, the four wives. We get their first person perspective and we inhabit them and really get to know them from the inside. And obviously we all have our favorites and we all have our sense of, oh, I prefer this one to that one, etc. Did you have those preferences yourself? Did you enjoy inhabiting some of the characters more than the others? Were there some that you loved and some that you hated?
No, I loved all of them because it was like role play acting, it's like, so for me it was fun because, I could be Essie and, Essie's just like ungovernable, so it's kind of like, and the more ungovernable the character was, the more fun it was. Like writing Lindani was lovely,
right?
Because I could be wild, because she's just wild. So for me, I enjoyed, it's just changing personas, and it challenges me, because then I have to think, okay, now we have to be back into Joyce, we have to be prim, proper, collected, and it's fun. I really enjoyed writing that book because I could switch, So I really did enjoy that, and I think what I liked was, because with a book like that, you have to get the characterization, because so that people know who it is and not get confused, because it's easy for people to get confused if the characters aren't, standing out for them.
Right.
I'm always interested, and you've touched on it, over everything you've written. Do you have a favorite character?
I don't.
Don't you?
No, I don't.
Nobody who is the most fun to write.
They're always fun at that point in time. When I'm doing the book project, because otherwise I would get rid of them. If they're not fun, they're gone.
You are so boring and fine.
What is the point? Like, why am I keeping you on this page? Yeah. So, I remember when in the original manuscript for Angel's Demise, Skeletons in the Closet, one of the characters dies whilst giving birth, and it happened in the first chapter. So when I was rewriting it now, okay, she dies. But she used to bother me. So it was like, she was like, you can't kill me now. You have to keep me alive. So I'm like, why do I have to keep you alive? And it was this thing that went back and forth. And then I said, fine, okay, I'm going to keep you alive. And, by keeping her alive, I developed a totally new storyline that took me to a really wonderful place. So sometimes, we kill characters too soon, or we don't realize the potential of them. So, so I'm also open, open to.
You're not going to kill off all the boring ones immediately. You might give them a chance to prove themselves. Fair enough.
How was The Polygamist received? Were people scandalized? Were they deeply absorbed? Did they have strong reactions to the situation that you set up and the different characters?
I think it was a scandalous book when it came out, because I think there were very few books of that kind, especially centering Black, African women, who owned their sexuality. So it was kind of like scandalous, but people really, it was like, but I think it's a very popular book. I mean, it's still selling today. And people still, it resonates with a lot of people. People love it. So, yeah.
And how does that compare to how Family Affair has been received? Because that also, I mean, there's quite a lot of sex in that book, and there's quite, it's could be seen as scandalous. I had a lovely time reading it on holiday. How has that compared, those two books?
So what I find, people who love The Polygamist also love A Family Affair. So my readers who were The Polygamist, because sometimes you lose readers, sometimes you gain. So I found like with The Gold Diggers, I lost some of that audience from The Polygamist who couldn't quite, get into The Gold Diggers. So for me, I find readers who love The Polygamist will love A Family Affair. Readers who love The Gold Diggers will love An Angel's Demise. And so it's like I have these two markets.
It's so interesting you say that, because I am going to make a confession. I have not read The Gold Diggers, and I have Angel's Demise sitting next to my bed. And at the moment, I'm not up for heavy reading.
Yeah.
And I've listened to you talk about Angel's Demise.
Yeah.
And I desperately want to read it because I love your writing, but I'm quite frightened of it.
Yeah.
Am I right to be frightened?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. So unless you love The Gold Diggers, it's unlikely.
Because The Gold Diggers also, I was too scared.
Yeah,
Everyone went, this really shows you the reality of the immigrant experience. It's terrible. Not the book. The immigrant experience is terrible. And I was like, I don't think I want to know how terrible everything is.
Yeah, it's a gritty book. It's difficult. To read. So if you
it's incredibly gripping. That's what I found with The Gold Diggers, that you start reading it almost sort of peeking between your fingertips and then it grips you and it gets you in and you are totally absorbed in these characters and their journey and you can't put it down. So Gail, if you're scared to read it, don't even start, because it'll suck you in and won't let you go.
Yeah. So it's so true. So I find, I have that reader, The Gold Diggers, who would love The Angels. There's the same book. They both grip you as well, but they're not easy reads, whereas the other two are. They're gripping, but they're easier reads.
And what's the next one? I know you're not there yet, but I'm sure that it's perculating somewhere. Are we going light or heavy?
No, it'll probably
light. Sue, can we have another light one?
It'll probably be light, because I tend to, because I've done heavy. So I tend to also write like that. Okay, so I give myself a break. It'll probably be light, because I've been contemplating, not even contemplating, I've been under pressure to write the sequel, either for The Polygamist or A Family Affair. So I might do one. I don't know which one I'll do, but yeah.
Does the idea of a sequel attract you?
It hasn't. It hasn't before, but I think it was interesting. We were having, the President's Book Club. We were having that discussion with A Family Affair, and something came up in that discussion that really gave me an idea of how I could actually do the sequel. It was through that I was like, okay. I hadn't thought of that. So it was like, okay, so that might be the path to go up.
Exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had a book called The Polygamist, and then we had a book called The Gold Diggers, which had a cover of a woman on it.
Yes.
Did that set up an expectation that this was going to be a kind of sugar baby, blessy kind of book? Maybe another scandalous novel. You said you lost some readers. Did it kind of set up an expectation which is then subverted, and did it cause annoyance and disappointment among readers?
It did.
Or did it earn you a whole lot of new readers?
So I gained a whole lot of new readership, but I lost some as well. So like you're saying, some people were annoyed. I remember this woman was interviewing me on radio and she's like, I read The Gold Diggers and I was like, where are the blessers? I'm now on page 200.
Where are the gold that's been dug?
So, for some people it was like, no, not, this is not what, I signed up for. So you'll lose those readers, but I also gain readers. So it balances out. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. You deal with some very heavy issues there. And you answer that question that I think a lot of people ask unthinkingly. Why don't they just go home?
Yes.
What are they doing here? Why don't they just go home?
Yeah.
So you address that question of what home is actually like and how desperate you can be to escape it.
Exactly.
And also the question of why don't they go back and fix what's wrong with this place that they messed up in the first place, you know? And you address that in a very real way and show how impossible and untenable that is as a single person, maybe a mother with a young child who's just looking to the future. Did it earn you any enemies? Because this is a very sensitive topic.
No, not that I know of. I don't think I ruffled any feathers. I didn't get any backlash from it at all. And I think An Angel's Demise kind of picks up from it nicely.
Yes.
Because we're revisiting country and those issues again, because they come to the fore as well. So that's why I say those two books are actually, you know, they're like, you know, they go nicely together.
Yeah, they complement each other.
Yeah.
Which touches on another issue for you as a writer in South Africa. Not only are you coming as a black woman writer with certain expectations, you're Zimbabwean, and we're in a very xenophobic society. How are you finding that's affecting how people receive your writing, or once they're in your world, they forget about it?
So I think when it comes to books, I don't think there's really like that xenophobic experience. People read widely. So people already reading African writers, on the continent anyway. It's not, and I think people who read aren't xenophobic. They tend to be open-minded.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they wouldn't, you know, wouldn't come to the table with that attitude anyway. So
I believe, and it's funny you mentioned Dorothy Coombson because I have a whole theory about her writing, and it touches on this, that your books can be a tool to also, if you can trick the xenophobe into reading it, that maybe at the end of it, their xenophobia will be a little bit less.
Yeah, because I think if it was in schools, really.
Yeah.
I mean, we'd censor out all the...
Let's put that out to the universe. Get it into schools. Let's deal with the xenophobia problem by making Sue Nyathi must-read material.
Yeah, but St. Stithians has it.
Do they?
I was going to say, I would be surprised if there's schools that are not looking at those books. And also universities. They must be on reading lists somewhere.
Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. It's already happening. So that, you know, I think there's something there to be said. And it's also enlightening, which is important for children.
Because I'll tell you my secret. I recommend Dorothy Coombson to people who have that I can tell there's a deep racist thing going on there. Because the thing with her books is you start reading and you don't realize the characters are black.
No, I said the same.
Deeply invested in their lives, and then you realize they're black. And I think it's the perfect learning experience for racist readers, because now they're so invested, and then they go, oh, wait a minute, maybe we actually are all the same.
Yeah.
You know, maybe we all have the same concerns and the same worries. And I think it's, so if I've ever I recommend her to everyone because she's great. But if I've like forced it into your hand, and then maybe you must worry.
And you're so right, Gail, because when I first read a Dorothy Coombson, I didn't know that the characters were black. And it also made me, you know, like question how do I know characters are black in a book? You know?
Yes.
Why do I assume? Okay. You know, so it was also like playing with my own mind. And yeah, that was very interesting. Then I wondered maybe if it was because they said, you know, located and they're British blacks.
Yes.
And maybe British blacks are the same as their white counterparts. So I don't know. I
have noticed her newer books. It comes up earlier and it comes up stronger.
Okay.
Yeah. I think she is grappling more with the whole issue of diversity and being a black person in a white country, so to speak. I'm using inverted commas there for the listener. But we're not here to talk about Dorothy. We're here to talk about you.
Well, one last thing about Dorothy Coombson. I strongly suspect there was a conversation early on where her publisher said to her, we are dying to publish you, but we want you to hide the fact that your characters are black. Yes, I think so. I think they did that. Let's hook the readers in, but, you know, just kind of hide that black thing for a while. Don't make it too obvious. And I think they designed the covers in such a way, because I've noticed that her new covers make it clear that the characters are black.
Yeah,
so I think there was a little covert racist conversation going.
About it.
I hope that we have her as a guest in South Africa one day. And I hope we have a panel with Sue and Dorothy. And that would be so delicious.
I would love, I'd love for her to come, because I think her books would actually be a hit here.
I think a
lot more people should be reading them, I think.
They really are. But okay, moving on from Dorothy Coombs.
Okay, moving on to A Family Affair, which came out in 2020. Mm-hmm. There's a very interesting, I wouldn't call it a subplot, but it's a thread that goes through the whole book, which is the mega church versus traditional society versus sort of Roman Catholicism, the more kind of more conventional face of Christianity. Mm-hmm. Did you draw on personal experience for this, or what was the inspiration for this plot line?
So so there is personal inspiration in the sense that I was raised Roman Catholic, and there was a time, because this book is located in Bulawayo, and so I'm writing about Bulawayo society, and that's very blatant. It's a blatant thing. I'm not even trying to hide it. Mm. And so there was a movement. There was a huge shift when people then moved from the traditional churches to the mega, Pentecostal churches, and it was big in the 90s. So that was so there was a very deliberate commentary. And why I did the church. So I was looking at a society that really is hinged on culture or tradition, whatever, the church and patriarchy. And those pillars really, those are the pillars that we grew up in. And it can be very oppressive, those three, that unholy trinity put together. So, and that's the whole premise of that book.
What I found fascinating as a fairly uneducated reader, in a way, I say uneducated about the Zimbabwe, and I know what everyone knows, but I haven't gone deep into it. And in my head, Zimbabwe is a poor country, and everybody's suffering terribly and running around worrying about how they're going to survive. And you wrote about wealthy Zimbabwe, and I was fascinated by that. Was that a deliberate decision to show us a different face of Zimbabwe?
Yes, definitely, because it's the same in South Africa as well. You have wealthy black Africans. Not everybody lives in Alexandra or Deep Street or in a township. You have affluent blacks who travel, who live, lavish lives. And it's the same in Zimbabwe. It's the same in every society, actually. And I think if you I don't know if you ever watched the Real Housewives franchise. I mean, they've moved to Lagos and Nairobi.
I'm trying very hard not to dip in.
But then I think those shows really showcase, it's a social commentary for me, in the sense that you see that even in those countries, there's always the cream, the elite who live, super luxurious lives. And so I also in my book, I also wanted to show that side of Zimbabwean society that is wealthy, that is affluent,
It was fascinating. I enjoyed it, but I was quite thrown by how I had to readjust my picture of Zimbabwe.
Yeah, no, I mean, I also get commentary from even Zimbabweans themselves who say, we've always wondered how the other half lives. It's always it was almost like voyeurism, because we could, go and peep
behind the high walls and the manicured gardens and so on, yes. That book came out, I think, in the same year as Angela McCall Critical But Stable, which was also a counter-narrative to the kind of poverty tourism that some African literature is. And a common theme is that here is this glitzy exterior, which is lovely to look at and fantasize about and to see how people live. But behind closed doors, everything isn't that rosy.
Yes.
Was that a deliberate choice of yours to sort of go behind the walls and show us that people have the same problems?
Yes. And the thing is, and so that people don't feel bad, because I feel like people always are doing sort of like a PR exercise with their lives. Everybody has problems, and there are no perfect families. But there's always this thing of trying to project perfection. People are obsessed with projecting perfection. And I don't know why that is. But every family has its flaws and foibles. And I think the sooner we accept that every family also has dysfunction, I think we'd sleep better at night. Instead of trying to pretend that, everything's rosy.
What's behind the Instagram.
And let's, and I think that's why people love that book, because it's reading it and you're like, oh yes, this sounds like our family. And it's that makes that book very popular. That, okay, so our family's not as bad as we thought it was. And I think that's why people probably like reality TV, because you're looking at other people's lives and thinking, okay, I thought I was messed up, but okay, I'm actually okay. Yeah.
Very fine.
Yeah.
So you've talked a little bit about what's coming next, and you've talked about as a child, all the voices in your head, all the characters. How do you know what is an idea worth following? Because I'm sure, like most of us who write a lot, you have lots of ideas. How do you know which one has legs? I get a feeling in my hands. I actually get a tingle in my hands when I've got a good idea. What is it for you?
I think for me, because I always say I start writing in my head before I put it down on paper. So I start playing around with the story, the characters in my head. I don't even put it on paper, but I start to craft it. And if it reaches a point where I can no longer contain it in my head, then I know, okay, there's something here we can run with. But sometimes it just dies. It doesn't go anywhere. Yeah. Yeah. But
I love that answer.
There was a fascinating part in A Family Affair where you're talking about the family that have gathered for this wedding, and you talk about how the aunts and uncles have arrived, and how in Ndebele there are distinct words for a particular type of aunt. The aunt that's related to you through your mother's side, the aunt that's related through your father's side. And there's one Ndebele word for something that takes a whole sentence to explain in English. Have you ever written in Ndebele or ever wished that you could or been interested in pursuing that?
I've never written in Ndebele, and I don't have enough vocabulary to. So I don't think I would do a good job of it. But, I always say, let that not be a limitation, that people can translate. And I'm really open to people translating my books.
And they could take that whole sentence and make it into one word.
Yeah. And so I think, so for me, it's not really a limitation. I think, because now we have, translation really gives your book legs. I mean, like The Gold Diggers has been translated into Arabic now. So it's available to that market, So I think it doesn't matter now. Even if I write in English, my work can still be accessible in other languages.
Right.
So when you were writing Angel's Demise, only I didn't know that was what you were writing, obviously, you talked to me about how you said you were deliberately reading books written by white women. And I was very taken by that because I'd never met anyone who had set out with that as a project before and falling into the right category. I was very pleased. And you told me that it was to write a right character, which in Angel's Demise now. Did you find that reading experience, did it help you?
It did.
And how was writing that character?
I had lots of white. So in Angel's Demise, I have the Williams family.
Yes.
And they're a white family who live on a farm.
Is it Melanie who was the main character you were researching?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was trying to get that authentic voice of her as, a white woman of privilege. And so, that's why I went on gobbling up all these books with, who were predominantly white female protagonists of a certain age. Yeah. So it did help. It really did help.
It's very interesting. And I think it's such a message to everyone about reading widely before you because I think as white writers, we're quite aware of be very careful where you go with writing a black voice. And it, for me, was so interesting that it works both ways, actually. Writing somebody else's voice is be very careful how you do that. I think that's a good lesson.
Yeah. And I think, so when I ask people, so what did you think about the Williams? They were like, oh, wow, you really got it. and the same with her husband, Paul.
Yeah, his voice.
Yeah.
Oh, that voice of the kind of
husband called Paul.
No. It's an older voice. It's a kind of 70s and 80s white Afrikaner farmer voice that just, it hit me deep down in a very uncomfortable way to see his voice there on the page.
So people would ask me, like, how could you wrote him so well, but how did you manage to, and I'm saying it's the same thing, you research, you also live, I mean, we live with, worked with white men. I've worked with,
the white male voice is quite a loud one.
How can you, so it's, so it wasn't difficult. So, but you need to do that research. So I always say, because I mean, people will be like, if you're black, you have no right, to write white characters. I'm like, we creatives. I don't think we should start limiting ourselves. But I think if you're going to do it, do it well, research it.
Do you think people do say that? Do people say if you're black, you can't write white characters? I know that if you're white, you're told you can't write black characters. I don't.
No, it's more for white people. I agree, yes. White writers. But I'm just saying we shouldn't put those limitations because we are creative.
Yes.
And your stories are not necessarily always going to be politically correct. And they're also not going to be populated by one race. So I think we should allow, writers that license to.
So have you found that you've talked about the political correctness and it definitely there is a move to books being more politically correct. Look what's happening, the debate about the Roald Dahl books at the moment. And I saw the other day James Bond is being rewritten to be more politically correct. Are you finding as a writer that when you come to the page, that's in your head more than it used to be?
No. I think we need to stop doing that actually, because writing must reflect the period. It's like can you imagine taking Jane Austen and trying to make it politically correct? It just doesn't, you're killing the essence of the book. And for me, I think it's important because I see myself as a social anthropologist of a kind that should people come 20 years from now and read my books, they should be able to understand the world we were living in and the norms and laws of that time.
Right.
I mean, I remember someone tried to give me flack for using the word, was a prostitute in the Gold Diggers.
Right.
And I said, I defended that. I said, that's what it was called at that time.
Right. No one was saying sex worker at the time.
So let's not try and make things when they're not. Be truthful to the era that you're writing. So my books are not necessarily set now.
Yes.
But they must always reflect that time period. It must be truthful to that era.
Sue, I consider you a Twitter superstar. And it's very interesting to me how you have crafted that space for yourself. And it seems as though it goes back to that column that you used to write. You put issues out there on Twitter and you immediately get a ton of engagement. Like everybody's dream idea of how much engagement that they would want is what you are actually getting. And I'm sure you're doing it intentionally, but it seems to me to be so sincere, and the way you engage with the people who respond is so sincere that I suspect that is the secret of your success.
Possibly, because I think I wouldn't have grown the following.
Right.
Okay, because I started like every other person. I remember I joined Twitter probably 2012. Right. I didn't have any followers. You know, and
so you started from zero like everybody else.
And, I just started, slowly. I was frightened of Twitter in the beginning. I won't lie. And I think there was one or two incidents. I think I said something and someone, came back at me and they were quite, grazing and, the response was quite, vicious. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't be on this platform. But then I sort of stayed on and sort of observed. And then I kind of, sort of grew a thick skin over the years as well, to say not take things personally. And, people on Twitter, some people are angry, some aren't, so you also, it's like almost like you're going to a room full of people. You can't see their faces, but, they're going to say whatever they want to say. So I think then I started getting bolder. Even, I wasn't afraid. And I think because writing as well is my forte. So I think that's why I was able to really articulate myself and, I could engage. But then I think it also became very vicious as well as I grew. People then start to say, okay, why is she popular? There's always that as well.
Yeah.
And so then I saw the other side, like how vicious it can really, when, people start trolling you and it can really get very nasty. And then people started burning my books. There was
burning your books?
Yeah,
burning your books. I missed that one. My goodness.
No, there was a time when I got trolled and someone said, your writing is so mediocre. I don't know how you've even managed to get so far. But, but for me, that was also a wake up call that, there's a positive of Twitter and then it can get very ugly as well. So, and then, there were people, there were comments like, I'm going to burn her books. She doesn't even, so there were things like that. It can get very ugly. So
as long as you paid for them before, go on.
So I then, I think that really for me was like, okay, I need to be very cautious because not everybody's energy on that. So I think I then started, becoming more measured even in what I said. And I think also the world of Twitter has changed in the sense that you have to be careful what you say, and our world has changed and everything can be misconstrued and things deteriorate fast. So I'm very careful now. Even now, I don't tweet as much as I used to. I also don't have as much time as I used to. But yeah, I'm also very measured, and I think I'm very careful about what I say.
I've reached a point I only share an opinion if it is something I'm willing to, that I believe in so strongly that I don't mind the trolling. So like I was quite outspoken about vaccines, and the need for them, and got trolled badly. But if you really believe in what you're saying, then yeah.
I think because you're a big fish on Twitter, people come for you because it's going to get more eyes on them.
Yes, true.
They know if they come after you, they're going to get more attention, and maybe somebody will check out their profile to see who's saying this crazy thing.
Yeah.
So you become a target.
To take on Sue.
Yeah, it's like that. It's that world, and every dog has its day on Twitter. And I kind of, I always say, like, I remember when I got trolled and I trended, not only did I trend in Johannesburg, I trended in the US. So it's like the whole day. So when the American Twitter opened and saw these tweets, they were on to me. But I think, but it passed. I think after that, I realized, the thing with Twitter is you'll trend today.
Yes.
Tomorrow, 2 days, people have forgotten, they moved on. And so I knew it's not a thing. So now even when someone is being trolled left, right and center, I say to them, don't stress,
Wait 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll blow over and people move on because there's always something people want to be onto one day. And
100%.
It's like a wheel.
Do you have thoughts about the direction that Twitter's going in since Elon Musk took over? Do you see the platform as essentially dying, or is it carrying on much the same?
I don't know. For me, I feel like we've outgrown it.
Right.
It's not the Twitter that it used to be. So, and I kind of feel like, well, for me, I'm more keen on growing my Instagram.
Okay.
Because I believe it's more reflective of people who actually read me.
Right.
So a lot of my followers on Twitter have probably a great deal. I could say 90% of them have never even read my books. But with my Instagram account, people who follow me have read my books. They're not just following me.
And book talk? Are you going to brave it?
No. So, yeah. So I think, for me that I really like that. And I like how it's grown organically and in the sense that it's people who do read me. So I feel I enjoy the engagement there more. And it's and my profile is really about my book. So I think I like that Instagram more now. I'm gravitating towards.
I know what I'm doing straight after this, following Sue on Instagram.
I think I already follow Sue on Instagram, so I'm ahead of the curve there.
I'll check while you ask our end question. I'm going to check if I follow Sue on Instagram or not.
Okay. Sue, we always like to ask our guests, what have you been reading or listening to or watching this week that has resonated with you or that you felt was a big failure, just that struck you in any way?
Okay, so now that I'm back on TV, okay, so I'm watching a lot of television, reference material as well. So apart from The Housewives, so I've been watching a lot of that to unwind. Because sometimes I just want to watch crazy TV because I don't want to think too much.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not thinking like, okay, how was the scene written? Because when I'm watching serious TV, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking of the script. But sometimes I just want to watch TV and not overthink things. So I've been watching My Housewives, the franchises. I enjoy that. It makes me laugh. It's a nice way to unwind after a busy week or day. So the serious stuff that I've watched, I'd recommend is Damn. I don't know if anyone has seen it. It's on Showmax.
How do you spell that?
Damn. D-A-M. Yeah.
D-A-M.
Yeah.
Okay.
Damn.
Okay.
D-A-M.
Yeah.
Damn it.
Yeah, with me, you never, because, my books with so much swearing. So that series is I really highly recommend it. And I also watched Behind the Eyes. It's a British series. It's on Netflix.
Right.
Highly
Yes, I've seen that.
It's actually brilliant. Yeah. I would recommend that to watch.
What's that all about?
Behind Your Eyes, I don't know how to say without giving it away, but The British, I'm very biased when it comes to the British. I think they're brilliant filmmakers. And I think it's also something writers could learn as well, in terms of the nuance and how you don't know who's who in the zoo until, they filmmaking is it's not blatant like the Americans, where this is the antagonist, this is the protagonist from the get-go.
Right.
They know how to build that tension line, the suspense.
Yes.
Which is good also when you're a writer. You need to be able to do that to sustain, that's how novels become gripping. The main character in this film is a single parent. I think that's also why I resonated with her. And she meets this man in a bar one night, and it's also that whole thing about connections. And I think for me, the fascinating thread with that film is, beyond what we see, there's also life happening behind the scenes, and it's got that layers, what they call magical realism now, but it's not really magical realism, the spiritual world.
Yes.
And I believe that's alive. So beyond, we have our physical world and the spiritual world. So I think that's why I like that. And I liked how the interpretation is stunning, and how they showed it in film. So please watch it.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, Behind Your Eyes. What am I reading? 2 books. The World of History, the new book by Simon Sebag Montefiore. I'm a history buff.
Yes.
I was also a history buff in school. That's something I didn't tell you. I used to be the top student for history in school.
Okay,
in high school.
Cool.
I would do badly in others. I wouldn't fail, but I would do badly, but I'd get the prize for history. I just loved. I used to gobble up history a lot. And we did a lot of European history.
I believe he's actually speaking at the Jewish Literary Festival.
He's in South Africa, or coming to South Africa.
Yes. So I'll be interviewing him at Gibbs. We're having So
brilliant.
So yeah, I'll be in conversation with him. So I'm reading. It's a thick book. It's like 1,000 pages, but it's quite voluminous, but it's not, I like the way he writes the history as well. It's not academic. So I'm also reading chunks of that. And I'm also reading Quality of Mercy by Pio Glorian
Yes. Right. Yes.
So I'm loving it as well. I'm in there.
I haven't read her yet, and everyone loves her, and I have to get myself reading her.
Yeah. No, it's stunning. So it's, for me, I guess, also because she's a Bulawayo girl, and so the nostalgia that she stirs. So when I read her books, so I'm enjoying it. She was actually, we were in the same high school. She was a year ahead of me. So.
Wow, what a high school!
Yeah.
So it's also quite interesting. Yeah. So those are the books that I'm reading now, that I'm busy
Great
with.
recommendations.
Yeah. Well, Sue, thank you so much for your time. We want everybody to buy and read your books. The latest is An Angel's Demise, but I believe they are all still in print and still available in the bookstores. So ask for them by name. And thanks again for your time, and have a good week.
It was awesome. Thank you.
Well, Gail, I loved everything that Sue had to say. I found her so interesting, and I was especially fascinated by the fact that she's not afraid to alienate her readers. Like, she will write A type of book, and then at the next book switch to B type of book, and then back to A type of book again. And she knows she's going to lose some readers along the way, but she also knows she's going to gain some readers, and she's sort of broadened her reading base in that way, which I find quite fearless and quite admirable.
Fiona, I'm fascinated that you find this fearless, because you write in so many different genres, and you have this wide reading base. Some are your literary readers, some are your fantasy readers. So I think you're admiring something that's admirable about yourself.
I don't know if I've ever done anything as dramatic as gone from something really quite fun and light and enjoyable to quite hectic and dark, and then back again.
Says the woman who literally bought out a Cozy Witch series around the same time as Lacuna, which is a very serious, quite heavy, but not so heavy I couldn't read it type of read. So really, you're admiring yourself there. I was also fascinated to do with that, how she doesn't let the political correctness weigh her down.
Yeah, it's just not something that she's allowing to burden her at all.
And I think there's a lesson there for all of us.
Absolutely. What about her story did you find interesting?
So it's more something that brought a personal recollection for me that she talked about her parents not accepting her writing. And she talked about it because of the type of people they were and because of the type of expectations they had. And I think a lot of people whose parents resist them becoming full-time writers think it's because their parents aren't creative people.
Yes.
My father was an artist. He was a full-time artist. He absolutely had no interest in doing anything else, despite the fact that it meant that we were very poor as a result. He was not going to do a full-time job that was boring. He was going to be an artist. But when I said to him, I'd like to write books, he went, oh, you're going to have to edit them. You've got to, there were no laptops at the time. You're going to have to retype them. It's very, very hard work. I don't know if you should do that. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like terribly hard work. I'm going to become a lawyer instead.
Oh, wow.
So I don't think creative parents necessarily encourage creative children, and maybe because they know how hard the life is and how hard it is to be a full-time creative person. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a child who at one point told me that she's very interested in writing, and I couldn't steer her away fast enough. I mean, I'd like her to pursue it, but I did say to her, you're going to have to get a day job.
Yeah.
So give some serious thought to what that day job could be. And so then she went, okay, acting. And I was like, no.
No, I meant a real day job.
Think again, a real day job, please, darling.
You can be a doctor or a lawyer.
Yes, or an engineer if we're really going to break out here.
Fiona, what is your lesson this week for our listeners?
Well, I was interested in what Sue said about her 9 to 3 schedule of sitting down every day once she's dropped her son off at school and setting expectations for herself. It's kind of turning your writing into a day job. Just putting your bum on the seat, getting the words out, the 2,000 words or whatever, which is a remarkable daily productivity rate, if that's what she is meeting. Just making those expectations and meeting them and treating it seriously like a job. I think that there are lessons to be learned there.
Absolutely. I'm not waiting for the muse. The muse is dead. I think that was one of the titles for this podcast that we considered. For me, the thing that she said that really triggered for me what I think is an important piece of advice is she has successfully gone back to early books that she wrote and she's now fixed up and turned into successful books. But I think that what goes wrong often for new writers is they write one book and it's not successful. They don't manage to find a publisher, and then they go back and they fiddle with it again and they fiddle with it again and they rewrite it again
and send it out again.
Send it out
and
again.
Get the same rejections.
Yeah. Sometimes your first book, it certainly was for me. I think it was for you. Your first book is a learning exercise, and your first book is not the book that's going to get published. When you finish your first book and you don't get it published, write your second book. Because maybe your second book is the magical one.
And when you send a book out, you can't expect a response before about 3 months at the earliest. So use those 3 months not to sort of fret and wring your hands and worry. Start the next book.
Absolutely. And then if you are rejected, you're excited about a new book already. And if you're not rejected, well, then you've got a little bit of balancing to do. But that's very doable.
Well, I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks to Sue Nyathi for her time, and thanks as always, Gail.
Thank you, Fiona.
You've been listening to another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.